they're related to the book of Exodus. We can hand those around too. We got a lot of these here. Yes. Okay.
We need more of that, the book of diagram. You need more diagram, 3 pages.
That's for next week.
Okay. So, yeah, I think these are things I've used in services over the years. And the questions today are how do we address God, or how is God known? And introduced in Exodus in particular, and where does God live? And those are probably the two most important elements that are brought in the book of Exodus in terms of theology. Now we have lots of important things in Exodus. The Exodus itself, we have the Ten Commandments being presented, but even the Ten Commandments contain a good degree of theology. The first commandment, for instance, I am the Lord your God. We also have the golden calf, which is seen as the evidence of how not to worship. Such important evidence that it was such a sin that a whole bunch of destruction happened afterward. Now, did you study the golden calf last time?
We did. Well, we studied Moses' trip up and what was happening below, and we got to the making of the
Mishkan. So you did get to the making of the Mishkan.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was discussed with the making of the Mishkan? Because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
No, we didn't discuss how it was made.
We didn't
said that
discuss.
No, not so much how it was made, but
discussed
why.
the purpose of it. Well,
that was the
Okay.
discussion at the end of
Is
the
that
Yeah.
Rabbi Hoffman?
yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little of what he and you, just it's a good review anyway, why it was made and, what, if you remember.
Well, we
fine.
have an outline for last week's
You have
session and the lecture, Egypt Journey to Mount Sinai, and
Right.
we do get to the Mishkan at some point. Mishkan is completed the 1st of Nisan, 2449,
Yeah, okay.
and pre-New Year, Rosh Chodesh.
Rosh Chodesh, okay. So, do you, I don't know,
But
is this a class outline for teachers or for you that has the name of God and the house of
That
God?
is for everybody.
You have that, okay. So, we'll do the name of God, and I'm prepared to move on to the house of God, but let's start with the name. And have you done anything at all in that regard? Are you talking about Moses meeting God, burning bush?
And I am what I am.
The name is abstract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some readings that are part of your collection, and I also have some supplementary material. So, names for God. Look at the sacred names packet. Yeah, we're going to jump around.
Well, we do. I mean,
That's
it's
good.
a challenge. It's very
It's a challenge,
interesting.
I know. So this is just because I'm assuming everyone has different Bibles again, and it's the text, the pertinent text is printed here, Exodus 3:13. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said unto Moses, I am that I am. Eheyeh, Asher, Eheyeh. And he said, Thus shall you say unto the children of Israel, I am, Eheyeh, has sent me unto you. And then God moreover said to Moses, Thus shall you say unto the children of Israel, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, has sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. So Rabbi Hoffman talked some about this.
He talked a little bit about the name of God, something I outlined, God that fulfills the covenant. He
Okay.
discussed a little bit, and the name expresses the relationship. I think relationship was a kind of a theme somewhere.
Right.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
Is this, the name that he gives, is he saying, I am, colon, that I am? Or is he saying his name is, I am that I am?
Well,
I'm sure there've been many.
let's put that down, because that's, what exactly is this God saying, this is my name? This is the essence of what I am or who I am. And I am essence, in fact. I am being. Ehyeh means being in English. Or I will be. It's the future and the past. Hayah, hoveh, yiyeh. Ehyeh is the future, actually. I am, I will be. So it also is, it's being in the future. It connotes permanence, being from the very beginning to the very end of time. But first, just the whole idea of God having a name. So Moses is saying, these people are slaves. They're not going to believe me. On the very basic level of the text itself, I need something. Of course, he needs a sign too, the whole rod turning into a snake and all that, the 10 plagues later on. I need something that I could bring with me to say who this is. So, first thing, God uses a name that has never been used. And then God, well, it's very rarely been used at different times, but not the primary name. And then God makes reference to the past. This is, I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Commentators talk about that. That's how we start the Amidah. Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Of course, we had the matriarchs at Bethel and in a lot of liberal places. But the idea is twofold. One, that God is a God that should be familiar from their stories. So it's although there's a very new aspect that's being introduced here, it's the same one that appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But secondly, that God, instead of saying God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, many commentators say that means that God is experienced differently by Abraham, by Isaac, and by Jacob, and by extension, by all of us. So there's an awful lot of fluidity to God. God is experienced differently by all generations. So having a name usually creates an identity that's fixed. My name is Joshua, and it hasn't changed since I was, I guess, 2 hours old, or at least 8 days old. That name, my identity, my personality has probably stayed basically the same. I've gotten a little grayer, you change over time, but the name sort of fixes you in some way. And here we have a name that is not so fixed, but is much more fluid, and in fact, changes. In fact, well, let's look at the next page. In this Sacred Names packet, next 2 pages, we have 104 names of God. And this is primarily biblical, but also from the Siddur, from our prayers, which come from different times in our history. So we have lots of different names of God here. And Adonai is the most important one. That's number 1. And by the way, Adonai is the least able to pin down, the least concrete. Why do I say that? Does Adonai, if you read Hebrew, does Yud Hey Vav Hey, which is a form of Ehyeh, it's the same letters pretty much. Does that spell out to Adonai? No, it doesn't spell out to Adonai at all. It spells out to what some have called Yahweh, perhaps, although we have no idea what the vowels are. The vowels that we see here are not ones that could pronounce any word. It's in fact completely vowel-laden name. Yud is a vowel in many cases in Hebrew. Hey is without real sound except, it's breath, basically. Vav, O, and Hey. So when you pronounce Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, you're essentially pronouncing breathing or being. So maybe, and I've seen people who've said, people who have issues with God, people who they're just perplexed about what is God. If you change the word God to the word life, or source of life, which in many Reconstructionist liturgies you'll see, or source of being, it's a little bit easier to understand because being has to have a source. It didn't just happen out of nothing. Somehow we're here. Somehow life is here. Somehow the universe is here. So, yeah, I think that there's something that's very evocative in that Yud Hey Vav Hey, the breathing. By the way, I want to show you some ways that God's name is used liturgically and in meditation. Page 6 again of this sacred name. We'll get to the text that you have, but I just want to give you a little sense here. And while you're looking at that, you can also look at this. This is something I have on the wall of my office behind my desk. Remember that we don't depict God in human form. That's something that's forbidden by the Ten Commandments. However, these are ancient Near Eastern documents and an anthology of photos. And this is how the ancients may have imagined God, or a god, or gods, in Sumerian literature, Babylonian. And it's not that ancient Israelites were that different. In fact, if I can find it, there you see a bull. Oh, here's one. Okay. You see this flying winged thing? Now that's how the ancients imagined God, or a godlike figure. Of course, you have the Sphinx also in Egypt. I mean, it's hard for us to think, did they worship that? There are idols found in many Israelite homes. Some might say, well, they were just sneaking them in like, teenage boys would sneak Playboys in and under their bed. That it wasn't authorized, it wasn't allowed. But in fact, this is how they imagined God. And so what happened, when we read about the sanctuary later on, they took these, because it was seen as very dangerous in some way, and they put them into the sanctuary to keep it safe, so that the rest of the people wouldn't worship it. They said, don't worry, we still have them, but they're in there. And they're called cherubim, cherubs, which now have sort of an angelic image, but basically look like this, probably without the face, although you have descriptions of faces on the cherub. Maybe not a human face. This is more of a lion's face. All of these depictions. So we have to almost imagine that for the ancients, what we're reading now was was taken very, very differently. And we can't think of it as idolatry in our terms, but just, interesting to know times do change. But that name stays the same. So an effort's being made to try to take the human imagery out of it and focus on the words, on the name. The name becomes the essence of God. So you have the Yud Hey Vav Hey here, Yud Hey Vav Hey on the top. This is just one depiction. This is called a shiviti, means a meditative device. You'll find it used a lot in Jewish meditation and prayer, especially in if you go to Sfat and any of the synagogues there, you'll often see these, or a mizrach. You know what a mizrach is? It means east, and it's usually on the eastern wall because most European Jews face east toward Jerusalem, but in some Middle Eastern countries it might face west or south. And anyway, so it's on the wall so that we pray toward. So we use this as a meditative device. So here, these are prayers, psalms in some cases. On the top, Shiviti Adonai L'Negdi Tamid, which is from one of the psalms, means I place God before me always. I place Adonai before me always. Now we can get into a great discussion of whether we should even use the word Adonai, because we try to get far removed from Yud He Vav He as possible, that it's seen as such sanctity and such holiness. So we don't say Yahweh, Jews don't. We don't say Jehovah, even if we're a witness. Jehovah's Witness. But we don't, because we see that as blasphemous. And many don't say Adonai, many say just the name, Hashem. So you'll often hear, especially in Orthodox circles, the term Hashem.
Yeah.
I'm sort of an anti-Hashemite. Right? I just feel that it's okay to say God's name, Adonai, because Adonai just means my Lord. It's not these four letters. I'll pass this around in case you want to take a closer look at it. So on page 6 and 7, we have these meditations on the four letters of Adonai, Yud, He, Vav, He, paying attention to breath, as I said. Now, did Rabbi Hoffman talk about this too?
No,
Okay,
no.
because I'm sure he's learned this. So Yud He Vav He can be seen as breath, as God is enlivening presence in our bodies. We're going to meditate on the holy name Yud He Vav He. Sit comfortably. This is a meditation. We're not going to do the whole meditation here, but we go to the next page. As we experience each breath, we're going to visualize the letters of the holy name as sections of the breath moving through us. The beginning of each breath is the Yud. The moment that the breath begins to enter our nose and head. Let each breath begin as a clearing of the nostrils and the head. And then the Yud moves smoothly to the first He. As the breath moves into our upper torso, we feel our lungs filling up, expanding as the He fills our upper torso. Then the long Vav of the divine name is the oxygen path. We watch the oxygen flow through our body, like the long Vav of the holy name. Yud through the nostrils and head, He through the torso, chest and arms, Vav through the length of our bodies down to the feet. Now the He of the exhale. Follow the full exhale until we're empty. We stay along with the empty. So when we talk about God meaning life, it's taking it very seriously. Breath, breathing, goes right through us. So godliness, God, sanctity comes right through us. And that's one way to see God, to experience God through God's name. Let's go to the last page. You can look through all of this, but page 11, sorry, not the last page. Page 11, where it says God's names. God as king or master may not be very appealing to 21st century feminist democracy. You can see where this is coming from. But these are two of the many labels and aspects which we name God. How about God as healer or orderer of the universe? Pretty much what king is all about. God as unity, maker of light, slave freer, source of wisdom. Our personal favorite God name is Yud He Vav He, usually written as two Yuds and pronounced as Adonai. This name actually is a verb. So what was the question before?
My question?
Yes.
I wanted to know whether he was responding, I am.
Is my name. I am that I am? Is that my name?
Is that one name, is he just answering with the name, or is he saying I
Okay.
am and then giving his name?
So if we think of God as a verb, maybe that's the answer. Yes. What are you trying to say? I'm sorry.
I think that was the whole name, wasn't I am that I am?
Yes, that's
It's almost like Popeye, you know. I
That's
am.
what I
I am.
thought.
There it
I just
is.
think of
There's
that.
no,
Um,
nothing
So here, as a verb, to be, Yud He Vav He contains all the consonants needed to spell was, is, will be. So existence is one of God's names. This name of God is also breath meditation, which we've just done. And the four letters, the last paragraph, also parallel our fourth center. The tiny Yud is our small, but powerful spiritual life force. The He is made of two lines, is our mind, its ability to sort and decide. The long Vav down the center is our torso, our feeling center, and the final He is our physical side, our 2 feet on the ground. We are truly made in the image of God. That's a beautiful way to look at this. Now let me check Twitter. Jerusalem under attack, but it's not the same. Missile lands in Jerusalem. This is one source.
What's the time in Jerusalem now?
It's Shabbat is about to start. Actually, it
Oh.
has sort of started, so people are going to have to leave their radios on. They probably would anyway. It's not being very specific about where, and I think that's what. Two rockets land, none hurts. Okay, that's from Stand With Us, Israel. I'm just going to check their source. That's sort of what we've been waiting to hear. Right. Imagine if, a rocket landed in New York or Washington. There would be all-out war.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No, it's fine. Really, it's fine. Okay, it's taking a while. We'll see if that report comes through. Okay, so I wanted to do that first because the readings somewhat lead us in different directions. Readings that you have, and probably a good idea to do those now. And probably a good idea for me to let someone else read. So you have the commentary of Rashi on Shemot 3:14, which, right, hold on one second. Which is what we just read. Okay, so you know that. You don't need to use your Tanakh if you don't want to. Okay, so let's hear Rashi, of course, that's 11th century, great commentator. You probably come across him already. I am what I am, Popeye. Okay. Tanakh, of course, this reading?
Yes, we talk.
You have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm just going to read Jerusalem Post. Last updated 1720, which means 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes ago. Air raid siren in the capital perceived rockets after sirens sounded in Tel Aviv for the second straight day. No injuries or damage reported in either attack. Okay, 2 rockets landed outside of Jerusalem Friday evening as sirens rang out, causing no injuries or damage. Police reported there was no indication that rockets landed in the city, stating that most likely the rockets landed in an open area outside of Jerusalem. Hamas took credit for the attack, claiming to have a shot from Qassam. Hours earlier, 2 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip in the direction of greater Tel Aviv area. No rocket impact was located in Tel Aviv, but local residents reported hearing an explosion following the siren. No injuries or damages were reported. Okay, so it's encouraging for now.
So that's why,
Yeah, that's
There.
10 minutes ago.
mhm.
I'll keep checking. Okay, so now, who'd like to read? Anybody? Go ahead.
I am what I am. I, God, will be with them in sorrow. It is I who will be with them in the subjugation that they will suffer at the hands of other kingdoms. Then Moshe said to God, Lord of the universe, why should I mention to them about other sorrow? They have enough sorrow already. God will continue shall be already.
Okay, so God promises never to leave them, no matter how bad they're going to be in the future. That's kind of a nice, it's a less profound, less theological. Rashi was known for that, for being very just on the surface. I am that I am. I'll be here in the future. Don't worry. It's not that God's nature is being explained here. And also, it indicates that they're not ready for God yet. They're not ready to get all the truth about God, for a complete understanding of God. But they're worried about the here and now, Moses is saying, So if you're saying, I'm going to help you when you're in trouble in the future, how much more trouble could they be than slaves in Egypt for 400 years? It's pretty bad. They don't even know there are people yet. They have a sense of themselves coming together as a people, but nothing really. So it's a very nice educational tool, by the way. When you're disciplining a student, you don't say, Joey, you didn't do your homework, and I'm very upset at you, and I'll be upset at you the next time you didn't do your homework. You don't do your homework in the future. You don't anticipate bad things happening from this perspective. Okay, so that's Rashi. Maimonides, a little more complicated. I found this to be not easy. So, anyone want to try to read it? The English isn't so hard to read, it's just to understand. Go ahead.
Okay. When God appeared to our teacher Moses and commanded him to address the people and to bring them the message, Moses replied that he might first be asked to prove the existence of God in the universe, and that only after doing so he would be able to announce to them that God had sent him. For all men, with few exceptions, were ignorant of the existence of God. They could not yet emancipate themselves from sensation, and had not yet attained to any intellectual perfection. Then God taught Moses how to teach them, and how to establish among them the belief in the existence of himself, namely by saying, Eya, Asher, Eya, a name derived from the verb haya, in the sense of existing. The verb haya denotes to be, and in Hebrew, no difference is made between the verbs to be and to exist. The principal point in the phrase is that the same word which denotes existence is repeated as an attribute. The word asher, that, corresponds to the Arabic eladi and elati.
Remember, Maimonides lived in the Arab world, starting in Spain and also in Egypt.
And is an incomplete noun that must be completed by another noun. It may be considered as the subject of the predicate which follows. The first noun, which is to be described as a yeah, the second, by which the first is described, is likewise a yeah, the identical word, as if to show that the object which is to be described and the attribute by which it is described are in the same case necessarily identical. This is therefore the expression of the idea that God exists, but not in the ordinary sense of the term, or in other words, he is the existing being, which is the existing being.
Of course.
That is to say, the being whose existence is absolute. The proof which Moses was to give consisted in demonstrating that there is a being of absolute existence that has never been and never will be without existence.
Okay. Someone please explain.
I could have read this about 10 times.
Right, I think that you would need to do that. But what's interesting, a lot of things interesting here. God not only is being, but God is all of being. God is the being of being. What Maimonides is saying, he uses a different attribute, but really he's saying that it's an adjective. That the noun, the name, is also an adjective. It is the description of the name. And we've already talked about, in the other stuff we just did, how God is a verb. So we got God as an adjective, a noun, and a verb. Anyone want to vote for adverb? And then we'll be all set. But Maimonides being very philosophical, really what this is just reinforcing to us is that God is very hard to understand. And that takes yeah, which almost sounds cartoonish. Like when I said Popeye, I wasn't totally kidding. I am, it just sounds sort of, I don't know, straightforward, which Rashi has been very straightforward and lifts it up a few levels of complexity, which, if you're going to be talking about God, you want God to be complex, especially since we are going away from the very superficial and almost immature, childlike gods that we see around us. This is from the Jewish perspective, among the pantheon of gods of the Canaanites or the Babylonians or the Greek gods. we're trying to get to something higher, something deeper, something beyond all those gods. So Ehyeh Esher Ehyeh, that's what Maimonides is trying to accomplish here. Make it as abstract as possible. So George Steiner, this 1997 errata, goes, I think, a step farther, makes an interesting point, and it's a lot to read. I don't know, I guess you haven't seen it, Omar, so we should just read through it. Anyone want to take us through this? Go ahead, thank you.
Rigorously apprehended, the Mosaic God is inconceivable, incomprehensible, invisible, unattainable, inhuman in the root sense of the word. He is blank as the desert air. If there is a Jewish theology, it is negative. Where polytheism, particularly Hellenic, clouds every leaf and branch and rock of divine neighbors, prodigially imminent, human, all too human in their vanities, tricks, lubricities, Sinai empties of any discernible divine proximity to habitat of I should have taken this on. It demands an extremity of abstraction. It condemns images and makes a blasphemy of imagining. Metaphor, whereby we people and dramatize our questioning of reality, whereby we throw bridges across the abyss of the unknown is cut off.
Oh, come on, this is easy.
It's true. To Moses, God's presence and commandment, which are identical, burn out of the bush. The sole self-disclosure is that of a tautology, itself a close one. It is the I am of excess. Paradoxically, however, the distance to an imageless, unthinkable, unseeable God is also that of an invariable nearness. Unseen, he sees all. Can there be a harsher observing than observance? One more alien to the animalistic, iconic, pluralistic impulses of human nature, to the consoling ways in which we tell the stories of our being?
Keep going.
The moral dictates which emanate from
Sinaitic.
Sinaitic and prophetic monotheism are
Might as well be in Hebrew, right?
This is why we study philosophy. Prohibitions on murder, on adultery, on greed, on the making of images, however innocent.
Yeah.
Oh, of images, sorry. I thought it
The
was something I
simplest
hadn't
word,
heard
yeah.
of. Okay, on the making of images, however innocent, on commerce with house gods, tutelary spirits, saints are themselves symptoms of a deeper demand. They entail the mutation of common man. We are to discipline soul and flesh into perfection. We are to outgrow our own shadow. A fundamental edict of ethical self-fulfillment, of self-surpassing, underwrites the Decalogue and the plethora of ritual pragmatic prescriptions that follows. No fiber of our native complacence, libido, inattention, mediocrity, and sensualities escapes moral and legalistic exposure. Nietzsche, become what you are, is the antithesis to the Sinai imperative. Cease being what you are, what biology and circumstance have made you. Become at a fearful price of abnegation what you could be.
Okay, so that, you could have just skipped the rest and just done that one line. The Sinai imperative, I am that I am, it's like a fixed but future focused, very harsh image that you are not of what the world is around you. Become what you could be. It's a harsh demand, that God is pushing us forward. My Rosh Hashanah sermon was about the God particle that was talked about in this summer in science, and the whole notion that that's what pushes mass to become energy or whatever. I'm not sure exactly. It's the energy that, I'm not a physicist, but I think the idea is the same here, that it's not accepted. It's not accepting of the status quo. That God is drawing us toward a more concrete and better future, I guess. That's how I interpret it. We're more than our biology. Now the last paragraph, he takes it one step further, and I'll take the pressure off him. Of this pressure, I believe, is loathing bread. From it smolders and bursts into the flame of impulse of relegation. The Jew must be banished, his voice gagged, and then of annihilation. Nothing fuels a deeper hatred in our consciousness than the insight forced on us that we are falling short, that we are betraying ideals whose validity we fully, even if subliminally, acknowledge, indeed celebrate, but requirements, whose requirements, right, seem to lie beyond our capacities or will. Nothing grows more unbearable than to be reminded recurrently, perpetually, it would seem, of what we ought to be, and so crassly we are not. I confess to find no better explanation for the persistence of anti-Semitism. Okay, it's God's fault. Yeah. So, by the way, who came up with this curriculum?
I don't know.
London.
Yeah.
It is from the London School of Jewish Studies.
I was reading that paragraph as like self-hating, and then we come up with persistence of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, you know, you can make a good argument that anti-Semitism exists because Jews have always been the thorn in the world's side, never accepting the status quo. Although we're not revolutionary by nature, there's always a little bit, wanting to push a little bit more, push the envelope a little bit more. And if you have a dictator, we're the enemy of any autocrat. Although we used to be pretty friendly to kings in medieval Europe, yeah, to survive. But that's why Hitler needed to get rid of us. That's why Stalin needed to get rid of us. We're always a thorn in the side. So, but I don't know that that necessarily relates to God and to this name of God, except to saying that current being is not sufficient. We always must be evolving, or even God to a degree must be pushing forward. Cease being what you are. Or God is commanding that of us, perhaps.
Sounds like
Not
a
so much
mother.
talking about his own nature.
I don't see this. I don't see this. And, in my, I don't see this as a Jewish thing.
No.
Uh-huh.
I see it more as a Christian thing. I feel like there's an imposition here of Christian,
So why
perfect the
Christian?
soul. Well, because the Christians have this concept of this afterlife and the soul, and so no matter what you do, you have to always, end towards that everlasting life of
Uh-huh.
perfecting your being and taking your being out of the world.
Yeah.
Whereas
Uh-huh.
the Jews, I feel, are more grounded. It's more grounded religion.
In this world. And I think, I don't know if this isn't necessarily talking about an afterlife. You could probably read it that way. But I think it is.
I'm not saying it's talking about afterlife. What I'm saying is that the Christian notion that if there's a strong notion that there's an afterlife, and no matter what you do, you're directed towards that afterlife. So there's no. That's what your life is about. It's about the afterlife. Whereas I don't feel that.
Yeah.
No, Judaism is not.
Judaism
Yeah,
doesn't say
right.
that, but it's about the future. They're still saying it's about.
But the real wonderful
Building
is
toward the
the
future.
afterlife of Christianity.
Yeah.
Or
This is just a very
Muslim,
temporary.
Or this one.
But
Yeah.
I look at it differently. I
Hey,
look at it
go
as a
ahead.
mother who, you come home with a 96, what happened to the other
Well,
4 points?
it's not good enough.
Nothing is ever good enough.
Yes.
And I think there's a certain jealousy attached to the people that keep getting these good marks, if I'm limiting it to,
Uh-huh.
and therefore there is a hatred. Once you can't attain what somebody else does, it's not acceptance or respect, but it's, I'm not good enough and I hate.
Yeah.
So anti-Semitism would play that role with the group of people that they need.
Uh-huh. He seems to be equating God's being with God's commandments in that second paragraph. For God's presence and commandments which are identical to Moses, and they burn out of the bush. So the commandment to get better, to be better, to do more, is burning out of, literally, God's presence, God's being. Is crying out to us harshly, without any clouding of it, without any dissolving, diluting. of the message.
I don't know, do you really think that Judaism, we are to discipline soul and flesh into perfection? Is that your concept? It's more mind. Get your mind in perfection, not your soul and not your flesh. I don't see this
Yeah.
as.
Well, I'm
I
not,
think this is.
I think it's kind of an angry comment. He uses an awful lot of adjectives or descriptions. And he talks about, or this pressure, I believe, is loathing bread. Is this some kind of self-hatred, or we have to prove ourselves as Jews, or we have to really, did we believe in monotheism at
Yeah.
Sinai as was dictated? Are we good people? Do we
Well,
set a lesson for the
I
world?
don't read it that way. To me, it's establishing a connection with God, and that by doing the commandments and growing in mind and body disciplining, that we begin to understand or feel the essence of God.
yeah, I don't think it's self-hatred toward Judaism or toward himself. I think it is a hatred of sort of pagan theologies that he sees around him, of, earth-centered, that God is in every tree, every leaf. No, God's above all that. God is beyond all that. And God is about perfection. It's not about the earth as it is. It's about, or us as we are, but it's about what we can be. We can contrast it to Nietzsche, who says, become what you are. He says that's the antithesis. Now, I have sort of something to counteract this. This is Art Green, who's a contemporary theologian, Reconstructionist by movement, but very much listened to by conservative rabbis and others. And his books, Seek My Face, Speak My Name. So this is his theology, and I really do recommend it. It's much more readable than this. I think it's the Britishness of it. I don't know.
What's the name of that?
Oh, Seek My Face, Speak My Name. He's come up with more recent versions of this. Is when it first came out in the 90s. Arthur Green. He was, I don't think he still is, the head of Hebrew College for Biblical School in Boston. So he looks at the Shema, and he says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, speaks of unity, nothing but the one exists, that fixed sense of God. We recite the Shema at death as we say it in life, as though to say that our death and our life have made no significant ripple in the great ocean of the cosmic one. Only infinity is real here. God is of endless cosmic space. Then we have the line after, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed be God's glorious kingdom forever and ever. This is the lower unity, the outer gate, the one within the many. We refer to it as the unity of God's kingdom. Here we encounter God's oneness in and through the world, not despite it. So Adonai might be above it or over it, that ultimate goal, but here we see God in each flower, each blade of grass, each human soul, which is a new manifestation of divinity, a new unfolding of the cosmic one that's ever evolving. So he gives it he said life is about these two truths. The whole earth is filled with God's glory. We realize that all around us, all we do, even our own lives themselves, are emptiness and vanity, that everything but the ultimate one is a mere illusion. At the same time, we know that each moment in our lives and every person and object we encounter exists through the one as a bearer of its presence. These two truths stand in dialectical relation to one another. Anyway, that's a bit too confusing here. But then he gets to Yud Hey Vav Hey. So he says, this name of God is the starting point of all Jewish theology. It is to be read as an impossible construction of the verb to be. Hayah, that which was, Hoveh, that which is, Yiyeh, that which will be, are all forced together in a grammatically impossible conflation. Yud Hey Vav Hey is a verb that has been artificially arrested in motion and made to function as a noun. As soon as you try to grab hold of such a noun, it runs away from you, becomes a verb again. Thought does not grasp you at all, as I've always known. Yud Hey Vav Hey as a noun can be the bearer of predicates. Okay, and then it says these are just vowels, mere breath, which we've talked about. Here we see the inadequate translation of God for Yud Hey Vav Hey. If I look for another English rendition of it, I'd probably come up with is, was, will be. Since that is awkward to use, as in blessed are you, is, was, will be, I am attracted to its abstraction, the term being. That is probably as close to English or other Western languages will allow us to get. But the identification of God and being, with which I'm particularly sympathetic, has to be handled with some caution. Being is itself an abstraction, a concept. It does not represent the same flow of energy as is, was, will be. Being is static, it doesn't have movement. Yud Hey Vav Hey is movement and stasis at once. If Yud Hey Vav Hey includes all that is, was, or will be, bearing within it past and future existence as well as present, it includes that which by definition does not currently exist. For Yud Hey Vav Hey to translate as being, that term would have to embrace all that was and will be along with that which is. Anyway, to express it differently, God is both being and becoming, noun and verb, stasis and process. All of being is one in a single simultaneity in God, and yet God is at the same time process without end. It's very philosophical, and you have to read the whole book to understand a little better. But so
Basically, it says God is everything.
God's everything.
And continually evolving.
But he's not as harsh as Steiner, because he's saying God can be in nature. God can be in the current. God is around us.
It's much more in a sense.
And then he goes on and talks about seek my face. God is in every human face. Because every interaction, Buber, of course, talks about I and thou, that we find God in that relationship between people. There's a spark of God, an image of God in every one of us. So that becomes Sinai, that becomes the moment of revelation where we connect to another person and then connect to our own destiny through our relationships with other people. All of that in 3 words, yeah, and share, yeah. That's why it's a very complicated thing. So we have 3 minutes to get to the other part. Where God is. I'm just going to, I compiled together 2 of these Parsha packets. Why does God need a sanctuary to live in if God is everywhere? People probably need to focus because we're imperfect. Remember that we just gone through the golden calf. So we need to compensate for the fact that we need something visual. That's what people are, it's a weakness of ours. But where does God really dwell? And I think the prevailing Jewish view is God dwells everywhere. And just to introduce you to some of the things you'll read here, the commentators make a direct correlation. Let me backtrack one step. Half of the book of Exodus is devoted to describing the details of this sanctuary. You got a few verses for the 10 Commandments, you got a couple of chapters, a little more than that for the Exodus, the most important events in Jewish history. You got Moses growing up in a sentence or 2. And half the book is a building code permit. It's this. This is how. Well, you don't have it.
Oh, shoot.
It's the one thing I didn't hand out.
You
Didn't have time
probably
to
find
print
it.
it. But email me, I'll be happy to scan it or whatever. But anyway, in fact, it's not in, something like it is in that, in the blue Chumash. Anyway, so all the details correspond in brilliant ways, Nechama Leibowitz described it in his packet, to the creation story. Including the fact that when God finishes the creation, the same terminology is used as when the people of Israel finished the construction of the tabernacle, the first Sabbath, basically. And how do we come up with the laws of Sabbath? From the construction of the tabernacle. The 39 labors of Shabbat that are prohibited come from this. So the direct connection is made in several ways. that we're not really talking about confining God to one place, even a movable place. Although back then they did need that. That was part of the culture, to have temples where God actually lived. The symbolism for Jews has always been that the universe is God's place. The word makom means place in Hebrew. It's called here a place of makom. But the word makom, if you look back here, the place, well, we have the name, the place, it's got to be here somewhere. That's one of God's names, Hamakom. When,
Place is 63.
63, there we go. It's not just any old name, it's one of the more important names of God. When I ask that God comfort the mourners, I say, Hamakom yinachem etchem, b'tov sha'arei Yerushalayim, Zion Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. It's the traditional usage, and makom is the word used. So God becomes the place of God's dwelling, which is the universe, just like the name is ever expansive, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, past, present, future. We also do it in terms of geography. We do it in terms of time and place. So, Book of Exodus begins with the time element, infinite, and ends with the place element, infinite also. The word olam in Hebrew means, anyone know? Olam, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, God of the world, but also we say king of the universe, because olam is expansive in that sense, and it also means forever. So it goes time and place. It's like both axes become infinite in these descriptions, which is really brilliant, because for most, there's where the difference is between Judaism and many other faiths, especially ancient ones. Sanctity is measured by place more than by time. You go to sacred places, cathedrals, beautiful, beautiful, Mecca for Muslims. You have in India, most beautiful temple. I'm sure at your travels you come across sacred places, mountaintops. But for Judaism, we build sanctuaries in time as well, more so than place. In fact, the Shabbat, Heschel, Abraham Joshua called it a sanctuary in time. So we're thinking of holiness not in terms of place alone, but also in terms of time. And the holiness in terms of place is overruled in a way, because once Jerusalem was destroyed, Judaism had to still evolve. We didn't have a temple anymore, so God became portable. And already in the wilderness, we have God being portable. This Mishkan, this place where God dwells, we go from place to place. So it presages the synagogue and the Torah, and Shabbat itself becomes sort of God's dwelling. We can be on the moon and observe Shabbat, and because we're there, God is there with us. There's actually some nice quotes here. Where does God live? On page 2, God dwells wherever we let God in. Wherever 10 people study, or wherever people study, the divine presence dwells within page 2 of this second packet. Page 3, God may be found wherever 10 people are assembled to pray, wherever there's a minyan. So Judaism goes to great lengths to say that God doesn't dwell in any one particular place. And even in the description of that place, it's telling us that because of the comparisons to creation. You'll find those comparisons, by the way, at pages 7, 8, and 9 from Nachama Leibowitz. You see creation, tabernacle, the 2 columns that draw the direct comparison. Unfortunately, it's in Hebrew in some parts, but not in, it is translated actually on page 9. So I'll just end with one more little editorial comment. That means that when you go to Jerusalem, and here we've been talking about our holy city all day, it is holy. The Kotel is a holy place, the remnants of the temple, but no holier than the mall. I actually have an article in the back of this packet about the wall and the mall. And where there is love, where people come together in the Spirit of God, that's where holiness dwells. So, the hotel, unfortunately, 6 women were arrested yesterday, and this has happened now every Rosh Chodesh for the last several months. With the Women of the Wall, you should read about it. It's really very sad, although compared to what's going on right now, it seems insignificant, but still. The Kotel does not have to be the holiest place, the Western Wall. You can be anywhere in Israel. I think Israel is a level up above the rest of the world. But anywhere in the world, you can still find God. Wherever we let God in, that's where holiness is. And we have a mini temple in each of our homes. The mezuzah that we put on the door, which has the Shema, which has God's name, that we just talked about, symbolizes the holiness of the love of God's presence in that home. So that's a good way to come to our conclusion today. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. I haven't top-level consultations, urgent consultation. Something's going on, but I haven't seen any other explosions or air raids. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
I've got it.
Air Force attacks Hamas commander. Hurt. Okay. Oh, and just Petraeus has finished his testimony.
We're doing something at Tapestry tomorrow, and we want to
Right.
and
Like the
also
comments
all
on
the
the
I know, that's why I
downstairs,
said
so
it.
if you could do it the Hamarat tonight.
Yes, I can do that. I have about 5 minutes.
Just come up and Elise, and I can always email it to you. Because I don't think I'll make the,
When I initially heard it, I didn't understand.
now,
What did I get to understand as life went on?
He understands.
figure out what to do.
Well, but you should be able to think it has
CIA director.
Yeah,
I should
but you
have
see, these people become so powerful, they think that
They're almighty, and I feel the same way.
Well, we've had a tragedy.